So what we're going to take a look at now is an alternative to using data annotations, and that's to add a package called Fluent Validation. Now it's quite a common technique when using the mediator pattern to add the Fluent validator in between the command and the handler. So basically we receive in this case our activity inside our create command, and then we validate against what we've got here, and if we fail validation then we don't pass the request to the handler and we pass back that 400 model state error to the client. So what we need to add is Fluent Validation. So I'm just going to open up the NuGet package manager and say add package, and what we want to look for in here is Fluent Validation, and I'll press return. And this will give us a big old list of Fluent Validation related libraries, but the one that we want to use, and I'll just scroll down in this list, is fluentvalidation.aspnet core. So let's go ahead and add this one. Now there's a couple of preview versions here, and I'm very wary about using a preview version of anything. So let's pick 8.4.0. which is the latest version available at the time of recording. And I'm going to select this one, and we want to add this to our application project. So let's go ahead and add this, and we get success, and let's hit the restore button to add this into our project. Now I've seen this before, this happened in testing as well, and for some reason there's an issue with adding this particular package, and let's take a look. Something about error, the resolve package assets task failed unexpectedly. But I have used this in testing and it did work fine, and let's just open up our application.cs proj file. Now we've got our package reference here for Fluent Validation. That looks good, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a command line, and I'm just going to open up a new session, and at the level of the solution I'm just going to run .NET restore and see if this resolves that particular problem. And it has, and we're not getting any errors. So just to be super safe, I'm just going to close down my API and just cd up into the solution window, and I'm just going to run .NET build, just to make sure there's no errors or problems that may be hanging around. And again, that looks fine. So why we get that issue, I'm not entirely sure, but if you're concerned, just take the steps I did, and this proves that our application is fine. So I'm just going to cd back into the API and just restart the application, and make sure this starts as well. Okay, that looks good. So what we're going to do is make use of Fluent Validation as an alternative to using those data annotations. And what we need to do, we need to go back into our create command, and in between our command and our handler we're going to create another class, and this is going to be called public class command validator, and we need to derive from the abstract validator that Fluent Validation provides us. So I'll say abstract validator, and then we pass in the commands, and we should be able to bring in Fluent Validation. So let's bring this in, and that didn't look like it took, so just try again. Yep, that seems to have worked. So make sure we have this available, and then what we can do is we can add a constructor. So let's generate a constructor for command validator, and then inside here we add our rules and what we want to validate against. So let's add a new rule, and we'll say rule 4, and then we add our expression, and I'll say x.title, and what we can do then is apply different rules that we want to validate against. Now there's a whole bunch of provided rules inside here that we can use to validate against, and we can also create our own custom rules as well, which we'll look at later on. But there's quite a few options inside here, and the one that we'll use is the not empty, and the validation will fail if the property is null, an empty, or a default value for the type, for example 0 for integers, or just an empty string for string values. So we'll use not empty, and before we can use this we need to add Fluent Validation into our services inside our startup class. So let's go to our startup.cs, and inside here where we need to add this, and what we need to do is add Fluent Validation as an additional configuration to our add MVC here. So I'm just going to come above the .set compatibility version, and I'm just going to say add Fluent Validation, and this takes some configuration, and we need to bring in Fluent Validation as well, and appears to be not available. This did not happen in testing, so let's just stop the application, and I'm just going to go up a level to reactivities again, and I'm just going to run .NET Restore again, which normally resolves issues like this. And let's try again, and it's still not working. If this happens, then the normal quick fix, unfortunately, is to reload VS Code, because this should be available and we should be able to add this inside here. So I'm just going to reload the window, which is annoying because then I have to restart the API and the client application, so it's not ideal. And once this is restarted, now we've got access to using Fluent Validation.ASP.NET Core. There's always a price for free software such as VS Code, and this is the price at the moment. It's constantly improving though, so hopefully we won't always see little issues like this. So what we also need to do is we need to give this some configuration, because we need to tell it where our validators are, and our validators are contained in our application project. So what we need to do is, in this particular expression, is say config, and we want to say register validators from assembly containing, in this case, so make sure we're using this one. And then we need to give it the type of where one of our validators is located. Now I've added the validator to our create command, so let's just use create, and then we can close this. So with this in place, we should be able to test this now, and like I say, a little bit annoying, I now have to restart everything as well. So I'll say .NET Watch run, and we're not using our client app at the moment, but I'll just cd into this and start this at the same time, and go back to the .NET window, make sure this is okay. And what we want to do here is just make sure that we see the same kind of response in Postman when we again try and create an empty activity. So I'll just resend this request one more time, and what we see is exactly the same kind of response as we got when we were using data annotations. So this is successful. So what we'll do is we'll just go back to our create command, and we'll just copy this rule down 5 more times and just do it for the rest of our properties, including description, category, dates, etc. So I'll just say description and category and dates and city and venue, and just make sure that all of these are going to be validated properly. And I'll click send again, and this time we see all of our validators hitting for each of these different properties that we're not providing. And we should just make sure that we can actually create an activity. So I'm just going to use the earlier creation of the create activity, and if I click on send, then we get the 200 OK. So we also just need to do the same for our edit command, and this is really just going to be a copy and paste job because our edits is using the same properties. So I'm just going to literally paste this into here as well and just bring in Fluent Validation, and that looks good. So let's just go and test our edit activity, and let's just choose this particular request, the edit activity with missing fields. But I do need to get the ID of a activity, so let's just get the ID of the activity that we've just created, and I'll paste this into my Postman request to put this, and if I click send, then we see all of our validators inside here, including the title. And if we click on edit and activity correct and send this one should work fine, although I need to update the URL to the activity that we've just created, and then I'll click send, and then we get the 200 OK. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for validation on our server side. We will come back to Fluent Validator later on for other things that we send up to our server, but this is what we're going to use to validate in our application. And what we're going to take a look at next is error handling in our API.